Yes, thank you so much for joining, and let's start with an introduction, okay? Mike Jones, CTO of loveholidays, and Dennis Kluge,
That's right.
Head of Engineering at Carhartt Work in Progress, not to be mistaken with Carhartt. Those are two different companies. Carhartt Work in Progress, the famous clothing brand. Do you want to say a few words and introduce your companies and what you do and how long you've been using Sanity as a little bit of a context for everybody in the room?
So I'm Mike. My picture's gone. CTO at loveholidays. I've been there for 7 years. We're an online travel agent, so we send about 6 million people on holiday a year. We do about 3 billion in transaction value. We're in 5 different countries across Europe, soon to be 10. Next year, about 20. Sanity has been kind of the linchpin of how we're thinking about our operating system for our internal users to be able to control the experience for our customers, for our holiday makers for 4 years, 5 years. It's been a long time. Yeah. So a long time we've been using it.
So hello everyone, my name is Dennis. I'm, as Magnus said, the head of engineering for the e-commerce department at Carhartt WIP. Also, as you've mentioned, there's a big distinction between Carhartt Inc., the workwear brand from the US, and Carhartt WIP. So we are more or less like the fashion side of things, and we are completely independent. So we're an official licensee of Carhartt Inc. But still we are very global, making roughly $500 million in revenue. And I'm responsible for the European market. That's a total of 23 different countries. And it's like we have a web shop, we have an app, and everything is connected throughout Sanity. I think we started like 3 years ago together. Actually, we have used Bloomreach before, and we're looking for a new content management system. And we piloted with the app. That's live for now like almost 2 years, and then introduced Sanity last year in August also to the web. And for us it's also an interesting part, so that the two channels, which actually operate very, very independently, technically speaking, so they do their own deployments, have their own roadmaps and whatsoever, but they have grown together throughout Sanity. And also the good thing is my engineering teams grow together here. So the whole Sanity operations engineering-wise is led through them and one main responsible engineer. So that's it, what we're doing. So I can also actually provide some engineering points of views here.
Let's start on a personal note. You're both big on AI development and using AI tools. What's your AI stack and what's your favorite AI tool?
Oh, I should go first. Oh, let's fight. Let's see. No, I'm a Claudist by heart. So I was actually very, very doubtful last year. I actually hated the whole thing. So to all those podcasts I was listening to, e-commerce podcasts, business podcasts, tech podcasts, they were all about AI, and was like, oh, where are the good old times? I'm approaching almost 40, so I was like, oh God, here we are. Things change, I need to be aware of. But last year, it was like summer last year, I got very, very heavily into Claude. I started with the small package. Now I'm a Max user, of course, running through tokens. And I make heavy use of Claude Code and also Cowork, and also, like prompting all the way down. And it's a big enabler. So that's what I use mainly. My engineering teams, they are using also Codex very, very heavily, and from the in and outs. So we do it for security assessments, using it for Sanity operations and Sanity things that we do, and also, of course, the usual agentic coding. So that's how it's distributed in our organization. Of course, we also use other tools, but me personally, there's nothing else than Claude.
Very similar. A big Claude fan, Cowork, loads of skills for almost everything in my job. I've tried to create a meta version of me to take over. It has access to everything I know because I've got a Obsidian Vault. It's got all the skills that I've encoded from like what I have to do in my job, from strategy documentation to even writing blog posts. Everything that I've got a skill for, and it's got access to all of my current state. So I'm trying to use it as a way of improving myself rather than just necessarily offloading work. So I'm trying to get a feedback loop of the things I'm doing with it. That's a bit meta.
What does that mean in practice? How are you improving yourself with these skills?
I get I don't use it to do things for me. I use it as a guide and a coach, and then to kind of rate the things that I do. So, for instance, if I blog a bit, so I get it to score all of my blog posts about the thing in frameworks that I use. So that could be what book did I read recently? Like the several short sentences of writing. I can't remember the author's name, but I took a load of notes on that book, put them into my vault, created a skill out of it, and then got it to review all of my previous blog posts on those things. And now it's a skill. When I write, it gives me feedback on those things. So I'm trying to get better personally rather than just offloading all that responsibility.
That's amazing. My favorite is running. I got 2 kids, 9 and 12, and I get so many emails from school. It's so hard to keep up with that. And also they give us some of these terrible websites that I have to log on to. Not everything is sent in those 5,000 emails. I build a Claude schedule job that also logs onto my Chrome and checks out everything and sends me a Slack message that also is sent as an email to my wife and populates a calendar. So I still struggle to keep up, but that's my personal Claude my Claude hack. But we're talking about your developer team stack, and you said you're both Claude, but you also said something about Codex. How do you think about choosing for your developers, for your teams? How do you weigh the different tooling, and how has that developed over the last, I guess, months and quarters?
So the way that we're judging AI generally, we've got a framework that we borrowed from DX, which is we look at cost, utilization, and impact across anything that we do. So we're looking at from a utilization, how many people are using it, the impact being, we would look at our DORA metrics, so things like how is it impacting our deploys, and the cost, obviously, it's a bit, that's the biggest one. So that's where I think our approach has been changing. We've been rolling it out, and we've been seeing the impact on our DORA metrics, but we also use code health as a guide to be able to see or to judge the output and to guide the output of the agents as well. So we've been seeing our code health improving, and that's correlated quite heavily with code that is cheaper to change, faster to change, and those sort of things. So that's kind of cool. But on the other side, I think the approach, because of the cost, especially with something like Claude being super expensive, we've not really signed any agreement with anybody. We're trying to keep it on the cheap. So we went into Claude Code quite big. We had 70% about now, 68% I think is today's metric of how much we deploy with AI code assistance. That was almost 100% Claude Code last month. It's now about 60-40 in favor of Codex this month, just as we're moving over from different tools to be able to manage the cost more effectively.
And these are just personal choices from your developers?
This one's top down. This is like move from Claude to Codex because of just the cost of the thing. So there's just the way that the contracts work. There's a very big cliff edge in terms of the enterprise agreement and what you're going to have to get to. So we're trying to manage that for the rest of the year and figure out as the landscape changes, just keep some flexibility and not go all in with one.
That makes sense. How about your team, Dennis?
So we actually started very pragmatically. So our IT department said like, hey, there's ChatGPT access, and it's the only thing we got actually. So there was no other choice to start with ChatGPT, and engineers just adopted it and used it heavily, more and more. Every engineer on their own pace. There are some people who are in doubts, just like me last summer, and others are just crazy about it. So, but they also want to push the boundaries. So they ask more and more for other tools, next to Codex, of course, about Claude Code, and other things. And it's then actually on us to also push those requests to the proper departments to get that. And it's hard also to predict what we're going to use in the future. I mean, like we are Camp Claude here, but from what I see, the features that are coming more and more, that's crazy. For example, Codex has just released a great security feature. I'm heavily missing that, for example, on Claude's end, so that we can scan our code. The both of us, we have to deal with money. So everything that's business critical regarding money and, APIs exposed regarding that, having those properly scanned and not, pen testing with expensive agencies and so on, that's a great thing. And I think they're also fighting here. And what we're also seeing, DeepSeek was released last week, version 4 was last week or 2 weeks ago. We also see great containers in the open source space here. So I think it's going to be very interesting.
I'm hearing cost as a factor. I happen to have some shares in Cursor. How much discount do you need to see from SpaceX to move all your developers over to a Cursor X combination? Okay.
I think that's something I would not recommend to the organization. But lucky that you have some shares. I think it's been a great deal for you.
I think the deal is yet to close after the IPO. So but if that 60 billion deal closes, then I guess everybody's happy. But thank you. Let's move over to Sanity-related development, and we're going to move into content operation, more about the editorials in a bit. What has been the story of your developers picking up the agentic side of building Sanity?
You want to start first? Okay. Good. I mean, in terms of development, I just had a feedback conversation regarding my engineers and how they approached Sanity together with agentic coding, and they say together with MCP and the Sanity SDK, it's like they're on steroids. So in terms of picking things up, improving our own custom tooling, that's what they approach these days. And I mean, we're working on solutions like custom tagging in the media library. So we're handling all of our editorial shots, like from photo shoots and whatsoever. The data is stored on Sanity. We're doing, custom tagging here, automatic tagging, things like that. We're a very small engineering organization. Usually we would not approach those projects, but, with the help of Codex, the SDKs and the well documentation, that's something that sets us up and also apart and, improves our flows. I mean, overall, what we do in Sanity with the tagging, with automatic translations and stuff like that, overall gets into more and more conversions to improve the conversions and also our customer experience. And that's how we approach things from the engineering point of view. I mean, also when we talk about agents, we use it for you have those embeddings, vector searches and whatsoever. And for me, it's a great helper to understand what's going on content-wise, like who has done what has been changed last, because for me, it's always important to also have an overview here. So that's how we approach things. In terms of content and content operations, we just get into that more and more. I think you are more advanced than we are, in terms of that. But we are also adopting patterns like the translations, generation of art text and stuff like that.
And when did you start picking this up? It sounds like you were a little bit of a holdout on the AI coding side, and that you really dived into.
I joined in August last year. So and we were on hold, but it was just before I joined Carhartt, I got into this. This was great timing here, and so before everything was manual labor actually, and now we are starting to push that very, very heavily. Us as an engineering organization, of course, to being the enabler for the content operators and content managers here. And also, I mean, there's no other way around to adapt this and to improve this, because we also see others using those tools. And also, I mean, from things like the tagging, from things like the translations, or also maybe we get into this in the future to automate things more and more. That's the way to go, because still, I mean, we are a fashion brand, but also we are, we have departments. We're doing all those handovers. Like Department A does X, Department B does Y, and everything belongs into a chain. And this is also things we need to tackle in the future to automate more on our end.
I think to understand how loveholidays use it, just a little bit of context. Obviously, our team's about 150 people, and so Sanity being a core part of the interface that we provide to our kind of content operating team. There's a dedicated team that we have that manage that capability, that adapt it for the users. It's the core part of how we're expanding our capability into more points of sale, more products. So they own that process, and so very similar in as you were describing. It's just kind of fed into our normal workflow. So in that 70% of AI assisted coding, we'll be integrating with Sanity, adapting it that way. The rest of it, I think the more interesting thing is how we, which we'll probably come on to later, how the content ops team themselves actually use that capability.
Yeah, and maybe you want to, obviously I've been following your journey, and I remember first time David told me about your pipeline for generating hotel property descriptions, and this was way before most developer teams started using AI in Sanity. You want to say a bit about that, which I remember as the original AI workflow you had. Maybe it wasn't the first, and then say a little bit how it has developed over the last year when you're building out more with AI on Sanity.
I mean, it's a large question, I suppose, because what we have many different teams across Love Holidays that are all part of this kind of automation piece. Have you heard of BOAT, which is Business Orchestration and Automation Teams? So there's a Gartner thing.
Now I have.
Okay. There's like this process by which all of these kind of tools are coming together. Sanity is like one of the ways that we're thinking about this as a capability. So. It was inspired, as you said, by some of the work that David did and some of the work that other people did at Love Holidays about how they're enabling teams to automate more and more of that work. So one of those pieces being how we think about getting content live on our website. Again, you have to think about as our business, we're not like yourselves. We're in many different countries at the same time. We've got a very small kind of content team. We've got somewhere in the region of, we've got 60,000 hotels that we sell package holidays to and 500,000 hotels that we sell hotel only. So we have to manage the content for that kind of orders of magnitude sort of content for those things. That's just one type of content that we provide. We have to generate that from supply content, which is fragmented, distributed from like very different suppliers. So we have a process which collates those things together, process it into something that's hopefully human readable, passes it through our brand guidelines, and eventually makes it through to the website in front of into our users. There's a feedback loops along the way as part of that, but also with that content, we take it and translate it into a number of languages. So we have to take the same content, in this case, hotel descriptions, and then translate them into, at the moment, 3 different languages that we support across Europe. So you've got many different kind of problems that we're facing at that point. It's the joining the data together, making something that's compelling and on brand, something that's useful for our customers, which we measure around, something that's translated into a different language in an efficient way, as well as then it needs to be localized so it takes on the nuance of that country or kind of segment that we're operating in. That's one of the many workflows that we have from Sanity in our organization.
Is it when you started building this? I remember you had good efficiency savings. First time I heard of it, this pipeline where I think something like 3 people made 5,000 hotel descriptions and 1 person made 50,000 because of the use of AI. It was a very clever workflow. And then later I heard you did translation. Has AI for you been? To what degree do you have you balanced between trying to take out cost versus accelerating the business, and what examples have been the most changing for the business?
You just gave the 2, which are great.
Those are the 2.
Well, yeah, I'll give you more.
I've heard of them.
I can give you more, but like those 2 are kind of the ones I can probably like bring to mind with like really interesting numbers. So it was a team of 3 people that ran content. Of those 60,000 hotels, they could only really write content for 2. Is it the Forth Bridge in the UK where they paint it? By the time they get at the end of one side, they have to start again at the other. So there was like, that's how we were doing our content. So that's where AI has changed. It went from good content for about 2,000 hotels to now AI generated content for the vast majority, 90-something% plus of all of that content is AI generated, which means that you've got much fresher, much up-to-date content for those customers. You'd be surprised how much hotel content changes. There's erratas like pools close. They change whether they want to have like adults only, those sorts of. So there's a lot of things we need to get in front of your customers as soon as possible. We can react a lot faster to those things. So that was a kind of a quality at scale, and that impact was we really seen in conversion, and we can drive those things out there. The second one being translation. Our plan is to be the global leader in package holidays. Our current processes is we're replicating that across Europe. Within that, we need to be able to get from no website onto a website that converts as quickly as possible. The first time we did this was when we translated it into German. So to get that process was human based. So we had an agency. I think it was somewhere in the region of £250,000 to £500,000 we had to pay to translate the entirety of the content for the website. Took months back and forth for those things. Now we can do the entirety of the site within this kind of workflow for like literally hundreds of pounds. So we can translate that same content for a fraction of the cost, much faster, much higher quality. We also ran an experiment where we put the AI-generated content versus the human-generated content in front of people, and it outperformed that in terms of like what the customers would prefer as well.
That's interesting. And looking at how we use AI internally, there's no question of the effect of having it. We see a lot of our customers are having a bit of a, I don't know if it's a cold start problem or if there is some skepticism. How do you make sure that you can manage it? Dennis, in your business, what you write is extremely important. How do you assess what can be and what can't be done? You have done a lot of translation. What are the enablers that make you use AI into the editorial flow, and how do you communicate that with the other editorial staff?
Yeah, good question. First of all, German is very complicated, so I get the costs regarding like $500,000. So maybe it was even a bargain. Coming back to your question, Magnus. So I think from what you've explained, it's also something that is important for us regarding those workflows and translations and whatsoever. We never ever would have thought of going live into new markets or adding translations because we need to be very, very, very brand aware. So that's actually manual labor, especially regarding the tone of voice. We even at the moment don't have, we have a newsletter and it's not in German. It's only in English. We don't have it translated because German is sturdy. It's a weird language. And when you read like fluent English and it sounds so lovely, in German it does not. So we're even aware of that. So, and what we are doing and approaching at the moment is literally what you have said, like thinking about translations for new markets, which would not have been, possible before, especially because of costs or like of the labor it actually takes. Yeah. So right now what we're doing is, for example, evaluating if we should go live in Denmark. We are live in Denmark, but not in Danish. The same thing for Poland, which is actually crazy. Poland is growing. The market is growing. The e-commerce market is growing. But having proper Polish translations and workflows and whatsoever would have taken a lot of time in the past. It would have been a major project on our end. Right now it's only about, thinking about scaling it up and setting it up. So on our end to understand like how are we even able to enable it. So we use automated translations in Sanity, but we need to do it end to end. Then not only product descriptions, but also the editorial content and the copywriting and whatsoever. And then we could theoretically scale that. And I think that's very, very important for us to understand and also, to show the content editors that the quality that we can achieve, it's that what we actually expect also for our brand. And
what are the learnings others could take, those who struggle to get started with that because they're afraid that the content won't be good enough or won't follow the brand guidelines? What are things you have done that others can take inspiration from?
I mean, like what we've done is also very, very pragmatic. We've just tried it out and had a back and forth with content editors and also challenged that, of course, with the management teams regarding that. And I think overall, it's still a change process and change management. And for us, it's all about building trust that it can be good. Like technically speaking, those things are non-deterministic. They hallucinate and do whatever they want to do. But if it sits like for 99.99% of all times, that's good. And I think this is also something we have done. And this is also then something that becomes one of those projects, and major projects that we see, okay, this is something we can automate, and it directly also pays into our KPIs that we have. Because on our end, what we see certainly is when, like one of our hypotheses, for example, when we're live in Denmark, also in Danish, of course, our conversion rates go up. I mean, like, it makes sense. It's your natural language, it's your mother tongue, and not, you're not buying on an English web page or like web shop. And this is something, it sounds also very abstract or like as a low-hanging fruit, but something we're really, really looking into it, as a next step in our content operations.
And Mike, you have a lot of the implementations that you've done are touching the boundaries of how Sanity is definitely not used as a CMS. It's really a content operating system inside loveholidays. Has AI enabled you to do new use cases, or are you using AI in new ways that is less traditional content operation, that content management that has been opened up now recently with AI?
Yeah, 100%. So I think touching on like maybe the two things there, we are. We want to be a platform business as an organisation. We want to be seen as something that's easily repeatable in more markets. That for us is to get to about a 40% EBITDA margin as a business. So we can't be throwing huge amounts of cost or huge amounts of resources at these sorts of things. We need to find a way to scale. What we've been doing is empowering the content teams themselves to be able to solve these problems. So if you talk to Deborah, who heads up our content team, she'll draw you the system that she's creating for how to manage content. In her head, she's got the flow about the way that she's. She had a 2-page prompt the last time I talked to her. The way she was thinking about how to set it up. She's got really a system in her head. So what she's thinking about is the system that builds that content for us at Love Holidays. She's able to then put that into our kind of Sanity and other kind of configurations to be able to manage the prompts themselves, but also manage the workflows on top of that. It's that kind of approach that's really helping us integrate AI into that workflow, but every workflow more generally, and to be more efficient and to get to that 40% EBITDA margin business.
You spoke also earlier about enabling the team to start developing, and they're using a lot of Claude Code, building out a lot of scheduled functions or agents with your non-technical team. Do you see that integrating with Sanity, also using Sanity content through our MCP servers to drive business cases, or is that separate?
I think we can, yes, definitely. The way that we're seeing it is, I suppose, what we do as an organization is becoming thin, as a platform ourselves. What's bespoke that we build is getting thinner and thinner. We're trying to use as many commodity systems on top of our platform to be able to support the users in that organization. But in terms of that, what we're also seeing is, instead of building user interfaces, instead of creating bespoke UIs, we're just exposing APIs with MCP on top of it. And that's, so Sanity just being a real kind of quick way to be able to access to your content, provide you context into various different parts of our systems. So you'd be able to get just another way of getting access. And what we're seeing is, especially in our kind of revenue management teams, yielding teams, they're starting to use things like co-work, actually moving very quickly to Claude Code themselves to kind of vibe up their own kind of interfaces, their own things on top of it. So we definitely see that progressing, Sanity being part of that context that's providing a lot more information, giving you access to much more than we had before, and mixing that together with all the other different parts of our platform.
I think it's an interesting way the market is going also, because we're obviously a big Claude shop, using that for everything we do. We're also proud to have Anthropic as a customer. Seeing more and more people internally use Claude Cowork or Claude Code. We see a lot of non-developers building applications. So all our sales training is built on Sanity and then deployed back to Sanity. Our intranet is built and deployed. We do not mind. We have an agent, but we do not mind if content operations happens through Claude. I think it would be unwise of us as a business. We see some people in the industry try to block MCP usage and rather give you agents through the MCP. One of the predictions we have for the future is that more and more UI would be consumed as fragments rather than whole systems, and it would be consumed through the MCP server. Where do you want to see content operations going? What are the things that you want to do that may not be possible right now, or you haven't gotten around to? How would you expect that the non-developers in your organization would work with content a couple of years from now?
So since we are on a composable headless stack, our challenge always is about integrations and content integration. So there's lots of content already living in Sanity, which is great, but there's also other content that's living outside, and making that accessible and also accessible to our content editors and others. I think this is one of the main challenges that we have. I think the pattern with MCP and also your strategy is, I think, about the right one. And I would beg other vendors like CDN providers and others to just offer MCP support so that we can all integrate. Because what we do these days, for example, we're using commerce tools as our commerce engine. We integrate Sanity with commerce tools, which is in the past has been hand-built, which works fine and great, but also scaling that up to our PIM, product information management system, to our CDN. The CDN has, like product shots, like flat shots and model shots and so on there. Like scaling that with manual labor won't happen on our end because like the engineering resources are limited, and I think this is also something I would love to see in the future for us, because there are so many open ends that we are not able to connect at the moment. And building everything on our own, I also think, like in terms of the integrations, it should not be our job. And if we have something great like MCP or like well-formed APIs, I mean, this is not a new thing, APIs. We have it like for decades. This is the way to go, because then also we are able to somehow build up a more excessive knowledge graph on our end, like where we can connect more and more things. As mentioned, we have those editorial shots, meaning like we have photo shoots and whatsoever. They live in Sanity. We automatically tag them. So like, hey, this is this pant, this is this shirt on the photo and whatsoever. But we're also missing lots of other things that are not tagged, contextualized, embedded, and whatsoever. So we're not able to build up a full story on our end. And this is what I love to see in terms of content. And also other things, maybe come back to that, is like things like campaign management and stuff like that. So we're heavily driven by campaigns on our end. We have the seasons, we have the pre-seasons, we have the collabs and stuff like that. Getting this going in terms of operations, this is also heavy lifting at the moment, and having it connected with the data and also external data like calendar events, like, hey, this new collab is coming up next week on Tuesday, and we can bootstrap the whole system, pulling in automatically the images, preparing the content, or like even reviewing the content and making everything easier and it can happen faster. This would be a big uplift for us. And we're not there yet, but I see a way to go.
So I think for myself, content's just one part of an important part, but my job is also across all the other bits. I'm quite actually lucky because I also look after our contact center, so like 1,000 people across like the world, and I would actually argue that our contact center is the best users of AI in the business, like the most. We're deploying at scale in production. We've been doing it for years, and it's had a huge business impact. It's saving us about 25% of the cost of our contact center every year. They're doing it at scale, and I think there's a lot of things we can learn from our contact center that would translate into content. So they've got very dedicated teams for the automation of these tools. Like they manage the system themselves. So like Sanity would be almost part of the contact center organizations, like tooling themselves. They would choose that tool, they manage it, they configure it themselves. They have the ability to build their own kind of capabilities within AI. So I think for content, it would look for me a little bit more like the contact center in the future. So,
is that the content of what to answer, or is it the context to automated processes?
So it would look. So the team structure would look more like a contact center. So where we have somebody like who looks after service design. So intentionally designs the service that scales. We have somebody who looks after all of the software. Somebody builds all of the tools, those sorts of things. I would like to expand out that kind of philosophy inside of our kind of into our content organization. So you're working with brand to design the content at scale. You're building all the tests around it. You're rolling it out. You're training people on those kind of tools. So I'd like most of those parts of the organization that use our platform, that are kind of business functions, to act more like the contact center.
My dentist in San Francisco, they call me with virtual assistant, which is wild, and it's just automated support. And if I want to change the appointment for my kids, I just say new appointment. It's like, here's what we have available. It works swimmingly. How far away are you from thinking, is that an option for Love Holidays to go full on automatic customer support?
We've got 60% of all chat and 20% of all voice is all automated at the moment. So that's inbound. So I've got loads of examples of it, but it's amazing when you see it and you follow it through end to end. It's a very natural conversation. It's not press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It's what you're calling for, or it's a back luggage allowance. And so our kind of agent can handle, I think it's like over 600 different intents now. So that's kind of cool, but it's all inbound. The way I think we would use outbound in a similar fashion maybe to your dentist. So we have...
Yeah, it actually calls me. And it calls me a lot. Yes. So it's slightly annoying.
Yeah.
It also, I figured out it sent text and I can reply to the text and that works easily. Well, that's much better for me. But yes, it does outbound. I'm not kidding.
But it was the same for us. So we're either outbound to sell or either outbound to our partners that we work with.
Yeah.
So what we sell, obviously, hotels through a whole wide range of people. They're one of the biggest issues that we have. Like less than 1% of all of our customers turn up to a hotel where they don't have a booking. And that's because we haven't many different reasons, but we can solve that through things like giving them a call through AI. But there's many different use cases that we could have where we can start outbounding using AI to be able to do that.
Is there anything in terms? Sanity want to be the context layer for AI applications, and part of that is delivering actual content. That is what the agent should provide. But the other is to give the business logic context to the agents that we predict would be a good use case for our platform. Is that something you have started using, or something you see helpful?
We have a tool called Dialogflow, which is a more deterministic way of thinking about a conversation. So you can design a flow of a conversation. Within each part of that conversation, you can talk to another service that pulls in information. So that kind of context you're talking about, we do pull information about holidays, about the destination, about those things, and give it access to the LLM, which generates the response, which is then fed back to the customer. So yes, we do, and there's it's within those kind of smaller contexts. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned Mike earlier, and you also mentioned in terms of Carhartt's use of the MCP server for understanding how the context is changing. Analytics is another part we're spending a lot of time on in Sanity, trying to help use case of how content operations happen and also the value of your content. What are you wanting to see, and what do you expect to be analytics use cases with AI from Carhartt work in progress perspective?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Overall, in terms of content, first of all, to understand, of course, the quality of content, whatever that means to our content editors. So that's not, you can say hey, it's an ISO standard, 2859.7 about, brand quality or whatsoever. But
maybe you could lend some of Mike's frameworks on developers.
Yeah, or maybe let's share a skill regarding that. But this is also very important how far that actually fits when also content comes from externals. Also, things like how often does content change and is actually needs to be improved. That's also maybe a thing that's very, very important for us. And also, outside of Sanity, how is actually the content perceived, and actually do users like this? And this is actually very, very interesting. I'm thinking about that because I think also connecting that, the analytical end, and integrating it to Sanity, that might be a good way to go. Because, of course, we know, in the app, how long someone is on the home tab and scrolls and is reading maybe this paragraph or whatsoever. But connecting it with Sanity and also contextualizing that, I think that might be a missing gap also for the future. I'm not aware if you have anything like that.
We're working on it, actually.
Interesting.
The interesting part is that historically analytics used to be web analytics, and you could pull it into Sanity, or you could not, but you could read it off. But actually understanding the content and what it means for people was pretty hard to assess. Now, of course, with AI, you could do that at the much higher scale, and you can also try to quantify less quantifiable data. So definitely something we would expect to be able to build, and yeah, we hope to build we are building a system that helps you define who you're talking to and what is that messaging. As one part of analytics, I think there are multiple parts that surfaces as useful analytics tool when you can scale up these operations. What are you thinking about, Mike?
You kind of took a different, but what we're
go back in the other.
Yeah, a little bit. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah.
We have a data mesh where we have basically aggregated a lot of the data from all of our systems into a single place. On top of that, we've also put an MCP, so you can ask that MCP any question about our data for the last 7 years since we started working there, and that's data from kind of quant and qual, from feedback from surveys that we've had from day one about team health, all the way to petabytes of data that we store about the performance of the website. And you can correlate all of those things together. So for me, it's the ability of taking that data outside of that system into our ecosystem to be able to connect it with everything else that we have. So we can connect it to all of the e-commerce data, all of our post-booking data, everything we can have a holistic view, and that's what we have a data team that's dedicated to creating that to be much more sophisticated, like over time. So the role of the analyst is changing from actually just answering people's queries to making sure that the MCP is actually responding properly to the people's queries and not hallucinating.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you.